our boss. How's the eye? How's your eye?
Pretty good. I still have to like close the lock because it gets itchy at night, but right now it's good. So I gotta be careful. I have my drops, but much better. Thank you.
With a tissue? I have tissues.
Oh, no, I just gotta do this every 15 minutes. I can't forget.
Can you take the roll call, Tina?
Roll call. Commissioner Caldwell,
Here.
Commissioner Morocco,
Here.
Commissioner Rowe,
Present.
Commissioner Galassi,
Here.
Commissioner McCauley,
Here.
and Chair Youssef Zai.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, as we'll proceed to saluting the flag and the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody, please rise. All right, ready to begin? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right, moving on to item D, approving the order of the agenda. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'd like a point of information or maybe change the process. We're made up of 4 different departments and maybe if like we have somebody from planning and somebody from recreation and somebody from library, if somebody's going to be doing a presentation and leaving the room and we have a staff referral on that, maybe it would be appropriate to move that around. So for example, if Parks and Recs leave, we can actually ask our staff questions at that time. And I don't know if that's I leave it to your discretion, but I do think it would be more productive if we can ask the actual department person rather than relying on the library director to convey the stuff and we may get an answer.
Recreation will be here through referrals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're fine. I move that we approve the order agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, moving on to item E1, blue folder items.
Yes, just to receive and file the subcommittee report that was sent out to you all.
Would somebody like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to receive and file.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. Do any of the commissioners wish to pull any items from the consent calendar?
I do. F3, please.
And I do F4.
Okay. Would somebody like to make the motion for approving the consent calendar item with the exception of F3 and F4?
Motion to approve F1 and F2.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on to item G, excluded consent calendar items. Speak about F3 first.
Okay. So regarding the minutes of 11:13, let's see if I can make this bigger because I forgot my glasses. So I'm gonna have a hard time seeing tonight. So item J1, I had requested that the minutes reflect that was I who made the motion. It's at the bottom of page,
Point of clarification, are you talking about the December or the November?
that was in the November one.
Okay.
So it was the certificate of appropriateness for the rehabilitation of the 3 residential structures. So that motion was made by me, not Commissioner Lang. That was something that I brought up, I think, in a December meeting. It just wasn't changed, so.
Okay, well, we'll make that change.
Also, I have a question. So that particular motion was contingent on the review by the minor alterations subcommittee of the front fence, and I did send an email to Director Rinke regarding that. And he mentioned that the planning manager had sent it to the chair for approval, so, and he had CC'd Mr. Scully on that. I followed up with another email in February. So the first email was on January the 23rd, and then a subsequent email on February the 4th, and did not receive any answer back. So I'm just curious what happened to that, because that was supposed to have been reviewed by the minor alteration subcommittee.
If I may, Dana, yes.
Please, thank you.
Planning Manager Sean Scully, we had planned to bring a item to the commission tonight to form a minor alteration subcommittee, and then we could process that application. We just weren't able to pull together all the background information. We want to be really clear on the purview of the minor alteration subcommittee, and it'll require some discussion by this body as to what type of projects clearly fall under the purview of the minor alteration subcommittee. So we're going to pull that information together and bring that to this body at your next meeting.
So I do believe we had discussion on that, on what the minor alteration subcommittee does. You may not have been here
Oh,
that
okay.
evening.
Was
So-
this with this body, the Public Amenities
With-
Commission?
Yes,
Oh,
with
okay,
us.
okay.
Yeah.
It was a carryover from when Stacy was here.
When we,
Okay.
during our first meeting, there was a few subcommittees that got consolidated from the 4
Right.
prior commissions. And we felt that a few of them required, urgent continuation of them.
Okay.
So I believe that was also one that we had voted on to continue with this commission.
Okay. That will save us a lot of work, and we can probably convene that subcommittee that was, determined by this body and act on those actions, hopefully before the next meeting, and you can report out to the Public Amenities, the greater committee
Right.
or commission. So I apologize,
I'm on that,
okay,
and
in the agenda,
Commissioner
too.
Lang as well. She's not here this evening. but
okay,
Commissioner
okay,
Lang and I are both-
fantastic.
yeah.
Well, I'll reach out to you. We'll pull together the items. We might have, I know we have one, there's actually another that is we're trying to get the details on,
Mhm.
that we feel falls under the purview of the minor alteration subcommittee, and we'll convene that subcommittee.
So for that particular item, I just want to get, to be clear, for that particular item, that's what you're bringing back? Or-
It would be, I'll have to look at that
Okay.
particular item,
Mhm.
but there is another applicant that is requesting some action on a project that we think would be under the purview of that. So there could be 2. I'll double check what the November 13th item was.
Okay, and fellow commissioners, you're okay with, are there any questions? Do you have any questions as to what the minor alteration subcommittee does? Or what it would be looking at?
You're going to have an opportunity when we get to the committee reports to express it more, but do
Yeah.
you have any more corrections?
That's it for that one.
I have one from the December meeting, and it's on page 4 of 9, where it talks about embedding in the process about halfway through. It was actually embedding in the sidewalk. So just, that word needs to just be changed. And that's the only thing I have on that one.
Okay, if there's nothing else regarding item F3 for any of the commissioners, would somebody like to make a motion to approve item F3?
I'll make a motion to approve item F3.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
And then additionally, item F4, which was also excluded from the consent calendar item, I believe Commissioner Morocco, you wanted to speak about it?
Yeah, I do. Let me just get back to the page where it was on. So this is a great report that came out of the library, and there's some things that need to be, I think, highlighted about the successes. One is the digitization. I probably now spent over a dozen hours on the computers looking at the old Daily Breeze items that have been digitized, and it's mentioned there, but I think it's a really big, valuable asset for the community. I was curious on the staffing. Has Helene already left, or?
She has, in fact, I think Monday was her first day at City of Long Beach in her new position. I've been here just over 2 years, and I understand the library is a huge incubator of talent. So we're happy to see her go on to bigger and better things, but she'll be sorely missed. She was a great addition to the team, and she brought a lot of vision, passion, and enthusiasm. So, but we didn't want to hold her back. She's going on to big things.
And did you find a replacement for your senior librarian, or?
We're still in the active recruitment process for the library manager position, the youth services manager position, youth services librarian position, I should say, the library services coordinator position. So we are working with HR to actively recruit and schedule interviews for those positions. But if you know anybody interested, they're all up on the HR website, and we invite all qualified candidates to apply.
And then Open Plus, it's been several months.
Yes, well, I'm glad you brought that up. We are working with our Public Works on that. the door mechanism has been unfortunately a little bit of a hangup. So we got the inside, what's called an electronic eye. We got that fixed and that was replaced. Then the doors were going a little wonky and we had the vendor come out and identified that the exterior electronic eye needs to be replaced. So we're scheduling that to be replaced. The good news is the vendor was working with our library staff, Tim Parker, and they were able to at least preliminarily exclude Open Plus from causing the issue. It's the outside electronic eye. So I'm working with our Public Works Department to schedule that. And hopefully once those electronic eyes have been replaced and they're working, then we can schedule an internal turn on of Open Plus. But I'm of course hesitant to say anything until we have it actually successfully operating internally. But it is on, it's on our radar and we're working actively to make it work and launch it.
I'm not sure the panel knows what Open
Yeah,
Plus is, so maybe you
yeah,
want to
I'm more
explain
than
it to them.
happy to identify it, especially from my background at the County of Ventura Public Library, where I was recently at. Open Plus is a system where, if those are familiar with the term access control, so basically a lot of your businesses, offices, you might have a badge where you scan and it lets you into a building. This is a similar process, but what it does is it allows us to expand library hours for people with a special access library card to come into the library during unstaffed hours and use the library. So the reason why I brought up Ventura is because we've been using that for several years at Ventura, a very successful program. It allows us to expand, again, I think very economically, library services and hours. And there are certain criteria involved to make sure that the building is secure. For example, we have installed security cameras. Those are in constant operation. We have a policy and procedure that we have for those wishing to access during unstaffed hours. Once, again, we get the mechanics worked out, then we can do a soft launch, test it, and then hopefully what will happen is those that are interested can apply and receive an overview of the process, because there is a little bit of orientation on it. Then they'll be granted access. And again, for security purposes, that privilege can be granted and then, of course, taken away if there's any ill behavior. But from my experience at the County of Ventura, we had really no negative interactions. All that applied found it very useful. And the tentative hours, once we get to the point where we can launch the service, would be a couple of hours, I believe, 9 to 11 a.m. Monday through Thursday, and then we'd look to expand it further if that is successful. But we find a lot of people, for a variety of reasons, can use the library more effectively during the morning hours on their way to work, or maybe they need a study room, or all the services that we provide at our wonderful Redondo Beach Public Libraries would be available in concept to those during unstaffed hours.
Would it be valuable for, to have like an orientation for the commissioners?
Well, I don't know where they are finally in the process, but what I do know that is Director Vinke, if you want a tour of the library and see the facilities, he's been more than accommodating to actually show you around, and it's a very impressive program that they have over there.
Thank you, and I'd be more than happy to my to-do list, but certainly I think once we have the door mechanism worked out, I'd be happy to come back and give an overview of the process and, of course, give people a tour of the working system once it's operational. Thank you.
Excellent.
I have nothing else on that report.
All right. With that being said, would somebody like to make a motion to approve item F4, receive and file library director's report?
So moved.
Somebody second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor? Aye. All right, moving on to item H, public participation on non-agenda items.
There are no e-comments or attendees for this item.
Okay. Would anybody in the audience like to participate on a non-agendized item? Like to speak about it? No? Okay. All right, moving on to item I, ex parte communication. Would any commissioners like to disclose any ex parte communication about the following public hearings we will have tonight? No?
None.
All right. All right, moving on to item J, public hearings. J1, a public hearing considering an exemption declaration and certificate of appropriateness application for an addition to the designated historic property located at 510 Garnett Street. We'll now open the public hearing.
Right, do you need a motion from us?
Do we need a motion to open the public hearing?
We did it once before, that's why I was asking the question, it's in the minute.
All right,
I'll
Can
make
we-
the motion if you need one, but I don't know if we do or not.
you can go ahead and make the motion.
Move that we open the public hearing. And I guess this is an administer an oath.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right,
All right, thank you, Chair, members of the commission, Sean Scully, Planning Manager. This item, I'm going to have our senior planner present the details and the information on this public hearing item. We also have the applicant present, the applicant's architect, so they also have a presentation for tonight's meeting. And it's up to the discretion of this commission how and when we move to that. But first, we'll do our staff presentation.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Okay. My name is Andrew Svitek. I'm the planner who will be presenting on this item, which is a certificate of appropriateness for addition to a landmark property at 510 Garnett Street. This property is located on the south side of Garnett Street on the corner with Camino Real west of Guadalupe Avenue. The property is zoned R3. The lot area is 6,400 square feet, and the existing square footage of the residence is 1,831 square feet. This property was designated as a local city landmark number 20 and is known as the Low House back in 1994. And it has been under a Mills Act contract with the city since that time. This house was built approximately in 1910. It's an example of a California bungalow style. There've been could be a few other styles, but that's what we've settled on. Some of the character defining features are horizontal wood siding, wood trim surrounds, decorative exposed rafter tails, an off-centered covered entry porch with a street-facing gable, the original historic entry door, and a garage carriage door. The second story and the garage carriage house are slightly later additions, but were probably done 10 to 20 years after the original house and are now considered historic. The proposed scope of work includes the interior remodeling of the original house. This will include a foundation upgrade, structural reinforcement for the second story, an upgrade of the interior staircase to make it code compliant, and various upgrades to the house systems such as electrical, heating, mechanical, and so on. This project proposes an addition of approximately 1,000 square feet on the first floor with a covered porch, and an addition of 697 square feet on the second floor. On the first floor, the west-facing gable element will be extended in height to increase the size of the living and dining rooms. And the south-facing elevation will be also expanded to expand the living area towards the rear yard. And there will be a new covered porch facing the rear yard. On the second floor, there will be an expanded west-facing gable, which will create an area for the master bathroom. There will be a new eastward-facing gable for an office and a new south-facing expanded bedroom area with a balcony that's relocated from its present location. Here's a site plan showing the corner property with the 2 street frontages. It's a trapezoid lot. The proposed addition is in a shaded color along the west and the south. And it shows the nature of the lot. It's a difficult lot to add on to because it tapers towards the rear. This is a summary of the area of the existing house and in red, and the proposed addition in blue. This is the detailed floor plan. Again, the addition is shaded and includes the living room, kitchen, and an extra bedroom on the main floor. This is the second floor area, which includes an expanded master suite and an office. Here we have a rendering of the Garnet Street main frontage. On the left, you see the existing house, and on the right, you see the house with the proposed addition. You see the addition on the ground floor for the living area and on the upper floor for the master bathroom. This is west. Okay, this is facing west on Garnet. So here you see the addition of the office over the garage on the left side. And this is how it will appear from the street frontage. This is a rendering facing east from Camino Real, the side street. There's very mature trees running along the street frontage, which make the house almost invisible. And the intent is to keep those trees. And in that sense, this addition could be considered primarily a rear-facing addition, although it is a corner lot. The rendering on the right shows what it would look like with no landscaping. This is a rendering of the addition from the rear yard, south-facing, and it shows the backyard porch as well. For certificate of appropriateness, we have to analyze it under our preservation ordinance, which incorporates the Secretary of Interior standards. And this is the summary of the criteria that we use for analysis. We also ensure that any additions are compliant with the zone, in this case, the R3 zone, and it's been reviewed for compliance with setbacks, FAR, outdoor living space, and height, and it complies. The proposed scope of work will maintain the characteristic features of the original house, which include such things as horizontal wood siding, wood trim surrounds, decorative exposed rafter tails, obviously the off-centered covered front porch with street-facing gable, the front entry door, and the carriage house door. The standards also ask us to look at spatial relationships of any addition. Here, the spatial relationships will be maintained through the gabled entryway with front porch, the living areas extending into side wings, and the second floor, which will maintain a master bedroom and a rear balcony. The standards also ask us to differentiate in small ways the new from the old. So we want these additions to be compatible and consistent with the original house, but also to have details so that under careful observation, somebody can tell which part is new and which part is old. So the architect has incorporated various features, and he can get more into the details of that. But for instance, some of the ways they've proposed to differentiate the new is by changing the width of the siding. So the new siding will be 8 inches wide versus 6 for the existing house. There will be vertical trim boards that will mark where the existing house ends and the addition begins. There will be differences in the door and window sticking and trim. You can tell that the original windows were just standard double hung windows, and the new windows will include a grid design. There will be slight differences in the roof fascia and the rake detailing. And the other ways of differentiating the new from the old is by having the addition tiered from the base of the main floor, and from setting the upper story addition from the street and setting it within the existing roof line. And finally, there's roof pitches that tie in the old and the new as well. And the third of the 10 criteria that are most relevant for a project like this that has an addition is just maintaining the essential form and integrity of the original house. So in this case, we have a collection of smaller elements that extend from the existing parts of the house, and that they don't create a disproportionate or boxy look. The existing floor plan and massing is the starting point for the addition. This addition goes into the original house at perpendicular 90-degree angles. The first and the second floor additions are stacked. And through these various means, we can see that if, hypothetically, if some of these, if this addition had to be removed in the future, it's a hypothetical exercise, that we could recognize where the original house ended. So based on that analysis, staff believes that this proposed project is compatible with the criteria adopted by the Preservation Ordinance and the Secretary of State standards, and staff recommends that the Commission adopt the exemption declaration and approve the application for a certificate of appropriateness for the remodeling and addition to the property. I'm now available for any questions. Thank you.
If you need somebody to start, I got a bunch. So I'm still looking at process items on this one, and some of them I am concerned with. This one is a landmark. It's the first historical landmark on that street. And we're over about 30 years since it was. And what you're presenting seems more like a pure remodel. You're losing all of the I don't even know how many, this is a California bungalow house. I don't know how many of are left in the community as far as that goes, but it just seems like this is a complete remodel. And I don't know if the process is we have to take this off of the historical landmark status because it's making a lot of changes to it that may not be part of it. I'm not sure that the distinctive features are being preserved. I look at the pictures that are on page 57 of our packet, and the thing that stands out with this kind of house is a standalone garage. Now it's like all integrated into it. So I have a problem. Maybe I've been spoiled by Stacy's presentations for a while. There's no discussion of the history of this property at all in there. It's called the Lowe House for a reason. Elmer Lowe lived there. Elmer Lowe owned a pool hall in the community. You haven't included anything that talks about his history. His family was in the community for many years. So I think this one may need us to pull it off of the registered landmark, and I don't know what the process is on that, but this does appear to be more of a pure remodel. And when the owners come up here, I'm going to ask them about the remodel when they acquire their house and things like that. I went back and pulled the actual meeting that this was put on the landmark, and I would have expected some of the things that were discussed during that time to be part of this discussion about the Lowe family and their involvement in the history of the community. So I think And then the other thing that, and maybe you can explain this too, the letters that were dated in support of this proposal are dated from June of 2024. And we're like 8 months later. What happened during that time that delayed the process of bringing forth the application to us at this point? And that's probably my first general question. What happened? Why wasn't it brought sooner?
Is there one that you want to address?
Yeah, well, there was a lot of work with the applicant, a lot of back and forth to work the project to what we consider to be consistent with the criteria that's required in order for this body to issue the certificate of appropriateness. So that was much of the delay, was working with the applicant. We've scaled it down from what it originally came to us for. So that's working with them to make that consistent with the criteria that we've presented tonight. So, and to address your earlier concern about the history, the landmarking, that has been acted on already. So that's not, in staff's opinion, that's not the subject of the hearing tonight. It's whether or not a certificate of appropriateness can be issued for a landmark, a property that's already been landmarked.
Yes, and that's where the concern is, because you're changing the character of this house. And you haven't presented us with what the role is. I don't know how many, again, do you know how many California bungalow houses are left in Redondo? I mean, that's one of the criteria to get the landmark status. How many houses are left that are California bungalow?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay,
I don't know every bungalow in the city.
okay. Don't we have a historic resources guide that kind of
We
gives?
do, and we could certainly bring that information to this body.
So I have a question. So
Yeah.
this was approved as a Mills Act house since 1994, essentially. To go to Commissioner Maako's point, can you just highlight a little bit about the historic significance of it? Because we do have to make a motion to approve both the historical application and the design plan, correct?
No, we don't.
Not the design, but the exterior characteristics of it, right?
We could, what I would recommend is the architect is very intimate knowledge of the architecture that is the design of this structure, was actually on the Preservation Commission back in the late 90s, and can provide additional details on specific architectural details that are associated with this type of historic resource.
Do we have any more questions?
I do.
Okay.
So I think what you're looking at is the historical resources inventory. That's what you're referencing, Commissioner.
That's the piece
Carl.
that's
Yeah.
not presented to us.
On that inventory, there are a number of houses which have not been designated. However, they are potential for designation. Some of those are A's, some of them are B's. Many on this particular street and in the surrounding streets are C and D rated, because I did go back and look at that particular document before this evening. I did also notice, which would be of interest to our commission and something worth discussing, there are a number of houses on this particular street that have been designated. So next door to 510 is 512, the Garnet Hussing House. Across the street, 511, the Wolfsburg House. And 509, the Chalvin House. 513, the Martin House. And I think on the next street would be the Pfeiffer Dodge House. All of these are designated landmark.
And 505, the McFadden House is also on the
And 505, yes, I have that as well. This is very interesting because what we should be having is a discussion on creating a potential historic district because of the number of homes that are designated. And in addition to the ones that are designated, we have contributing houses. Those are the ones that are not designated. However, they could be on this list of historical resources and on the inventory of historical resources, and that potentially have the same character-defining features. That said, that's one discussion. I'm not quite sure why it hasn't been acted upon. So this is of interest because I know that we on the Preservation Commission did create a historic district on Catalina, and before my time, other historic districts were created. So I'm just curious if we can go back and find out why a discussion was not had for this particular street. There may be a reason that I don't know about. Okay, so that's number one. Second, I have some concerns. So that second story addition, you mentioned that was added 20 years later, because when I first looked at this house, my first impression was that addition up top, that part up top had to be an addition, because if you look on the street, right, you do a Google Maps search, you'll notice that the other houses, the next few houses have the same, or basically the same bungalow house. And so this was an addition that was added. So from what I'm hearing tonight, it was added 20 years later, which would then be what, 1930-ish?
If I can point out, it was actually when it was first set up, it's 1924 is when the second story was added.
That was, 1924 was the second story.
Correct.
Okay. And so that second story addition is also considered to be historic. Is that correct?
That's correct.
No, it wasn't part of the original house.
Correct.
Okay. So if we can go back, oh, there it is, right up there. So if you can go to the photo from the other perspective of the house, yeah, right there. And the proposed, you have the proposed.
I'm not sure.
It's on page 57, I believe, of your material.
Disappear.
Oh, give me a second. Whoops, I just lost.
Yeah, maybe it's just not coming up.
All right, I have it on mine. So what I'm noticing is that if we're saying that second story addition,
Okay.
yeah. So if that second story addition is historic, why are we removing the windows on the side? Because we are not supposed to be removing windows, right? It's been designated a landmark, historic landmark. And now under the Mills Act, which, I haven't studied it closely, but I'm just curious, what additional requirements, once you are under the Mills Act?
So the answer is that for landmark properties, there's this process called the certificate of appropriateness that does allow additions. This is a perfect example where houses are not going to always be static. They do evolve over time. And so these houses, otherwise they get torn down because they don't suit people's needs over time. So in an effort to hang on to as history, we have this certificate of appropriateness that allows people to make investments into the existing structure and expand them to be more livable. And generally what the effort is to maintain enough of the original integrity to be representation of what the house was when it was built, and to integrate an addition usually towards the back that is not very visible or prominent, or it's just subservient to the main house. What makes this a little more complicated, as you recognize, is it's a corner lot. So there's anything that's going to be in the rear is also visible from the side, but there's extensive trees, and but that is generally how all these certificate of appropriateness function. They allow current homeowners to expand and invest in their historic landmarks.
I don't deny that. However, that wasn't the question that I was asking. The question that I was asking is, why are we removing windows that are part of the original historical elements of the house? That's number one. And then you bring up another point, which was something that I wanted to discuss as well, is this line of sight here. So in my experience with preservation, anytime we looked to approve an expansion of a home from the line of sight of the street, it would have to be not materially visible. This is a very visible change from not just one side, but two sides of the house. And trees are impermanent objects, right? So as we've seen, unfortunately, last month, what happens to trees. So from my perspective, I have to agree with Commissioner Morocco. This is materially changing the historical view of this house. And I don't know how my other fellow commissioners feel about that, and I would like to hear what they have to say.
I had a couple questions real quick. I'm trying to determine on the proposed, the brown portion on the top, is that a deck? It is.
Yes.
Yeah. I think what you're hearing is when you look at the resolution that's been proposed, and I just did a real quick look, I think it fails section 2, B, C, D, E, and possibly others, because when I got to E, I kind of stopped. And I think that one of my fellow commissioners asked was, maybe we remove this from the list. I mean, it would seem to me to be nearly impossible to add 1,700 square feet to a historic bungalow and have or agree that it would maintain the historic, let me look at the terms, design and original residence, and retain the changes that have been made and that are therefore considered to be historical. I mean, I completely understand the desire to take a historic home, and we need space in Redondo. I know if you have a family, you're looking at these homes, probably the average home in the city of Redondo Beach is probably less than 1,700 square feet, and here we are adding 1,700 square feet. So I guess, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I almost have a hard time just with that. I get having a large lot, but for staff, where do we go from here in the sense that I don't think that with the historic designation of the home, I don't think that you could move forward with a project like this, but I don't know what the process is to remove a home. And especially after you've possibly, I don't know if this current owner, but owners in general have reaped the benefit of having a historic home for all of these years.
Mhm. Yeah, they bring up a lot of points. We're hearing the commission loud and clear on this. I might suggest that we do hear from the applicant.
Yeah.
And find out a little bit more information on their opinion on the integration of this addition to this landmark facility. But, you know, we're hearing from the commission on this and your considerations or what your opinions are on providing or doing an addition to a landmark facility, and what threshold we're looking at there that would go beyond what would allow it to be retained as a landmark, and then what that process would be. So we'll have to do a little homework on that aspect. Again, though, to the applicant's point in they haven't come up yet, but in the meetings that we had, it was really about adaptive reuse and doing a lot of improvements structurally to the structure that, since it's 1910, you know, obviously needs. This is way more certainly than just a maintenance and retrofit, but we felt we looked at it from the mass and scale of it and the proportionality of it, and we saw that the ground floor as existing is a wider footprint with a more narrow second floor. And then what was proposed was a retention of that proportion of mass with an extension of the ground floor in the rear and a little bit, and also on the one side, and then a proportional extension on the second floor. So we felt that part of it was consistent with the maintaining of the integrity of the overall mass and scale of it. But I think, you know, we're hearing, you know, what is that threshold for an addition on a landmark property? You know, that's something that we need to explore. So.
Well, I do want to just note, because two of us sat on the Preservation Commission, I really want to note that we've approved a lot of alterations and renovations.
Yeah.
For my entire time sitting on this commission, I've never seen anything quite like this. And I really don't even recall an instance where something came to us, you know, with, and again, I'm not trying to, I would love a rooftop deck myself, but to maintain a historical home and I'm struggling here. So I would love to definitely hear from the applicant.
Okay, and if I may, real quick, it would be something good for us to bring to this commission, landmark properties that have been issued a certificate of appropriateness. I'm aware of additions of second stories to other landmark properties. So it would be good to see, you know, to establish that threshold and have a good sense for staff then to move forward with a consistency in this regard.
Yeah, no, that's what I had mentioned before, that, you know, any additions that we looked at were not materially visible from the street. And we did approve extensions that even went up to a second level, but because of the grade of the sidewalk, of when you would stand at the sidewalk, you really could only maybe, you know, see a little peekaboo view of that second story. And there was something else I wanted to say. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say was, I don't know what happens once you're part of the Mills Act, as far as removing a property, designated property. I do know that if you have your property designated, you can appeal to have it removed. However, I don't know what happens once you're part of that Mills Act.
We can also look at that. Yeah.
Yeah. However, you know, there is a path.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a great house. I wanted to buy the one across the street a number of years ago.
Can I ask another question?
Would you like to direct it at staff before we go to the
I
applicant
would, 'cause
and interested
I'm
parties?
looking at the two pictures that are up there, and I'm looking more at the pictures that are in our packet at page 758. You didn't comment about the trim. And on the garage, you can definitely see there is a change in how the trim is being presented. And then if I'm looking at the pictures, the frontage of the house appears to have a different size trim as well. And I think trim was one of the things that we've talked about before. So,
I don't know that the garage, that's not part of the historic structure.
I think it was part of the original structure.
It is, it is. The garage and the second story were constructed in the 20s
Okay,
and then became landmarked as well.
okay.
All right.
If you want to talk about that, that would be, did you consider that in the process, that you're changing the trims completely?
On the existing structures,
Yes.
yes, but we do, again, I'd like to have if the commission would like to have the architect come up and explain.
Yeah, I think we appreciate the city staff's time with this. I think we should hear from the applicant and then, the architect, any other interested parties, so.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Miles Pritzcat with Pritzcat Johnson Architects in Redondo Beach. Well, thank you for your time in this, and appreciate your comments.
It does elevate, by the way, if you want to.
It does?
No, the
Yeah, you
whole
can raise
podium
this
will
one.
elevate.
Oh, not just like them, but the whole podium. I have a presentation. I don't want to belabor everything, but I wanted to touch on a few points that may be germane to some of your comments, or may not be. So, I was on the Preservation Commission, probably about 30 years ago, and I thought, as a lifelong Redondo resident, I went through Redondo High School, all the way through Redondo High School, and my parents still own the house on Avenue Jean Catalina. There was a time that I remember when the thought of ever having any sort of incentive to maintain historic homes would have just been, you've been laughed at. And so the Mills Act is a wonderful way to help balance the pressures of development, providing a tax incentive for people to maintain the properties and keep them vital and keep them going rather than benign neglect and then we have to tear it down. So with that statement, one of the things I did learn being on the Preservation Commission was there were tools for preservation, and they ranged in scope. If you can go to the next slide, please. One approach is no change and complete restoration. This is a project that we got approval on to do a very small remodel in the very back, but there'll be no change whatsoever from the front to anybody who comes across this later on. Next slide, please. This is an example of another project that was approved by the Preservation Commission right next door to this house, where they've dealt with a second story addition on the back of this. So that's another approach to take. And next slide, please. The other approach is to incentivize property owners by, when they have enough space, is to maintain the existing house and then build brand new homes or condos in the back. In this case, they added a driveway, they put front garage and so forth. So there's a series of tools, all of which were relatively recently given certificates of appropriateness and to move forward. So I'm not really sure that what we're asking for is that different than the range of things that we're seeing right here. Our goal is to ensure the survival of this house and continued thriving of this house for the next 100 years. And square footage is an issue. It's a small house on a large lot. It's an expensive piece of property. My client is very motivated to work as much as possible with the Preservation Commission to achieve our ends, and we've had some comments tonight that we're willing to look at. But there are real costs associated with these structures. Next slide, please. What we think is very important are the porch elements, the kind of, I call them the Queen Anne porch element with the turned spindles. And you can see from this Sanborn map from 1916 that there are 4 houses with identical characteristics listed in this 1916 map. We know the houses were older than that. So we are retaining that very distinctive character-defining element in the neighborhood that is repeated. So we're not changing that at all. Next slide, please. We are proposing, the only sort of ground level change we're proposing is to take that gable end, that's what you see on to the right of the screen, which is west facing, and extend that to gather some more square footage on the first floor. And that's an area that's at the corner, it's kind of open space. Next slide, please. We talk about character defining elements. You'll see that in the original that's a book at the Historical Museum on the landmarking. You see that house was never red, but now we want to maintain that red color because it's been in the neighborhood for at least 30 years, and that has evolved as a very character defining portion or a component of this historic home. So there's sort of like a shifting, if you will, of how these things are viewed by how they are presented. Next slide, please. Just as an example, this house was originally depicted as having another bedroom on the upstairs when first, and there's a small room at the bottom of the page. Next picture, please. That other bedroom at the very top is a space you can't even stand in. A child can barely stand in it, but that was sort of portrayed and shown as having, square footage. So there's 200 square feet on the second floor of those types of alcove elements that make great children's playrooms, but they're not usable to any sort of adult. So next slide, please. In addition, there's some sort of built-in problems with the house. I don't have the records on it, and perhaps Commissioner Morocco has the full file on that, but I don't believe that it's very possible that there was no permit ever done to build that second story on top of that structure, because the floors are sagging right now. It's improper headroom in there. You'll crack your head as you go up the stairs. The rise and run is super steep. It's almost hazardous to go up those. And that's germane to the discussion in that to make that correct and make it safe means a modification to the floor plan to make that all work. The guardrail up there is not the code, that's an internal element, but there are some of these issues that should be corrected in order to ensure the lifespan of this house as it moves forward. Next slide, please. We mentioned the unreinforced masonry in the foundation system, which is really a problem. Yes, you can argue, well, the house has stood for over 100 years right now, but we don't know if that will continue. And oftentimes in the beach areas, they use beach sand and the mortar and grout, which it crumbles away. So that needs to be addressed. Next slide. And we have here sort of the built-in drainage issue between the carriage house and the main house, where they're abutting each other with roofs draining into this center area. Again, that is something that we can address, we believe, in an appropriate manner, but will allow the house to continue and to be able to function properly as it extends into the future. Next slide. All these changes and these upgrades without adding square footage alone involve cost. To upgrade the house as it is with those costs without gaining any square footage starts to really, I guess, call to question the viability of such an investment. And again, my client is committed, we are committed to doing what is possible to come up with a structure, a home that largely resembles the historic home, but there are a few changes that are subtle. We've set back that element crossing over the back of the carriage house is 35 feet set back from the property line. If you're walking down the sidewalk, it would be very difficult for you to see that was even there. Our perspective is kind of floating a bit higher over the street there. Next slide. We've tried to work with the existing floor plan. We felt it was very important to maintain the iconic front porch with a turned spindle and the existing front door. So we've done that. And we've used that sort of as a guide to inform how we're laying out the house. So the house will continue to function. You walk in the front door, we create a small entry with a powder room, and then by pushing out to the left with the west facade, we're able to have like a larger room that is will function as both a living room, dining room, and kitchen, with the bulk of the square footage added to the rear of the property and not visible. Next slide, please. We are trying to balance the massing. We did pull out a little bit on the right, and that pop-out will be delineated by, there's a vertical existing trim will remain, so you'll see the difference between the two sidings, so that will be clearly notated. As well as, I think the staff mentions that there might be a possibility of some other sort of complementary color, such that the original massing and structure would be even more clearly delineated. Next slide, please. And you can see that we're reusing the existing upstairs area where we're showing the master bath. That's the area where there was a very low unusable bedroom. So we're simply keeping that same footprint, but raising it a little bit higher to get more space out there, but keeping that at that area that's closest to the street and closest to Camino Real, we're keeping that basic massing in place. We are adding on again to the rear of the property, and we are, for example, taking the existing balcony and moving it further south so that there's a sort of analogous usage there. Next slide, please. A lot of the roof is going to remain, except you see that where I said this area is modified for drainage. We're proposing to extend the existing roof pitch over the carriage house towards the main house that will have a good flow of water that will not pool in the middle of the structures, but it will still be appropriate for with the pitches and the appearance of the house. Next slide. I think staff has covered this, but you can see that we are relying on the fact that my client Kim wants to maintain vegetation and trees. Yes, things can happen, but we can always replant. They prefer the privacy. The backyard is magic, and we want to keep those qualities. But so this is what we are presented with the rear-facing structure. You know, the new work. It looks sort of like towards the rear, and you can see diagonally across Camino Real. But in fact, that you can practically see it. You can't see anything at all. If you get the next slide, please. This is, you know, we're recreating the same in the rendering the trees. And then if you strip away the next slide, I think you saw this before, that we actually are trying to keep not a massive addition so that there's still even sort of a subordination to the original structure while sort of maintaining the overall feel. So next slide. So I understand and appreciate the concerns of the commissioners, but I think one of the very important aspects of the Mills Act and certificates of appropriateness and so forth are to find a way to extend the lives of these homes and structures in a way that is both beneficial to the community and also beneficial to the owners and to even subsequent owners who will find that rather than taking on a historic home, they would take on a beautiful home with historic attributes to it. So I do believe we can find a win-win in this, and I'll conclude my comments at that.
I have some commentary here. Just not on the Preservation Commission in the past. I'm a novice, mechanical engineer, real estate consultant, real estate agent. So not too well versed in any of this. If this were a single-story bungalow, you could not do this, correct? The second story would be an absolute no. Is that correct?
Well, it's already landmarked as a two-story
Yeah.
Your
residence.
hypothetical question, yeah.
Right. If it's a single-story bungalow at 1,500 square feet, none of this would pass. But now that you've got this historical 1924 addition on top, this is a possibility, right? I mean,
That's generally correct.
You're not radically changing the house, you're just adding on to this second story. So I'm just trying to, from a philosophical standpoint.
Generally correct. Commissioner
Yeah.
Galassi's point earlier, you know, there have been, let's say there's sloping issues, so
Yeah.
there's a second story that could be added where there wasn't one before, depending on its visibility. So there are some extenuating circumstances for that, but generally, if it was this lot and it didn't have a second story, it would be much steeper hill to climb.
Right, and then how about and I don't know the surrounding houses, are they all single-story bungalow types, or are there other ones with second stories?
As far as the block, I think there are 17 homes, and I mean, there are some 2 stories. The ones that were built at the same time remain single stories. This is the only one that got the second floor addition, but I mean, this is also unique, larger lot, it's a corner lot, so I mean, it presents unique challenges for an addition because of the lot.
I would say suggestion for a future meeting is just to video the street as you walk down. It could help us to understand what we're looking at. That's just a suggestion, but that's all I have, just some commentary. No questions for or against.
I'd like to follow up on your last point. It would be nice, I like walking the neighborhoods, and you can get a better feel for the properties if you're actually able. So if you can give us some more advanced notice of which ones you're going to be bringing forth or may be bringing forth, so we can go look at it.
Good idea.
In person. And if you can turn it back to slide 14, I really would like to analyze that one again. So if you had to describe what style this house would be at this point with these changes, what would you describe it as?
Well, I would say it's the same style as it is right now. Probably the most distinctive element on this existing house is the front porch. And so that's sort of a Queen Anne type porch with the kind of the gable, the spindle porch, turned spindles off porch posts. But the rest of it's pretty much like sort of folk Victorian or sort of, sort of a basic, California bungalow type, but not much sort of craftsman influence. So it's a pretty simple structure with a few defining elements to it. And then the second story element is basic 1920s style home. I believe it was a C-rated structure when it was landmarked. So, not to sort of condemn it, but the architectural significance of it are, I think, most prevalent and most apparent in the sort of French porch design and the roofed front porch. The rest of it is very straightforward, and a lot of the other sort of aspects that come from the actual, the wide lot, the siding, the way the carriage house is interplayed against it, and the carriage house has a very distinct pattern. And to your earlier question, Commissioner, we are not planning on changing the trim on the front of that at all.
Oh,
So,
it looks like on the picture, that's
well,
what I asked.
yeah, but that's not our intent. Our intent is keep that.
And on the subject of removal of trees, are any of those trees legacy trees that would be in violation of a different ordinance?
I haven't gone that far, but we're planning on keeping all those trees along the back there. So, that you saw from El Camino
Not
Real.
proposing to remove any trees, because it looked like there was one on the side of the house that you would remove in order to expand.
I'll have to look at that. I don't know the answer right now. So, but at that, we would have to, if we were proposing that, we'd have to follow, to work around any ordinance that we have, so.
You would know.
Yeah, no, there would be, it's if feasible requirement for replacement trees that are designated as mature trees. And that's defined by a tree with 12-inch diameter at 4.5 feet above grade. So those would probably qualify. So we would require a replacement tree, minimum 36-inch box. That's a standard practice for that.
So the current house is 1,800 square feet,
Yes,
and you're proposing to add another 1,700
yes,
total. So it's essentially doubling the size of the house.
correct. I also included, Commissioner Galassi, in my original submittal was a comparison of floor area ratios of other historic homes in the area. And you'll see that we're, I think, at 0.52 we're looking for, and there are others that exceed that or others around that in the immediate area. So from a square footage standpoint, it's not unheard of to have that type of ratio of floor area to lot, and this is a larger lot with historic homes, and there's some even exceeding that. For example, the one I showed I showed you where we had the historic home in front and the two townhomes in the back. The FAR on that is huge, but it was considered, apparently, I was not involved in the hearings on that, but it was considered to be an appropriate step to take in order to ensure the viability of the front house. So that's where we're kind of coming at.
So I think, yeah, I'm not sure that we have all the information as far as square footage of all the, houses directly surrounding this particular house that could potentially wind up in a historic district. The biggest problem I have is the distribution of the square footage and how it appears from, especially from the street, from the front of the house, especially on the left side, facing the house on the left side. To me, that was the first thing that just sort of took me off of the, I don't even know the appropriate words, but it just sort of, that was the first thing that I noticed. And as I mentioned before, all these houses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that are designated historic, and then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 514, 516, 521, 523, and 524 that are on the historical resources inventory. They have a rating of C and D, so I'm not quite sure of their viability to be landmarked. However, they would be contributing resources to a historic district. My concern is that, in changing this particular landmark house, how it affects, the rest of the immediate area. In addition to, the problem that I have with removing those original windows, which is something that I don't think that we can do.
Well, we can look at that. I'm sure we can find a way to keep those windows. I appreciate your concern on that, and I think we can make that happen. I can't tell you that you're say you're wrong in your perception, but I believe we have tried to make every effort to minimize the visual impact. And again, our renderings are trying to convey that, but if you walk along the sidewalk or drive on the street, I think the impact is fairly minimal, and that the emphasis is still on the main, I would say even in more of the earliest historic element, which is the front porch with the gable and the spindle post porch, as well as the special, the diagonal doors of the carriage house garage. So I feel like that many people would not even be aware of the change once they're done. I mean, obviously as commissioners, you would, but I think that most people, and again, understanding that there are, some back and forth in the whole thing, but when I was a commissioner, I know that at the time, one of our thoughts was, how do we ensure the viability of this, even into a sense, if it didn't have special historic protections, but it would be considered a viable property on its own merit without having to have any extra protection. So, and I feel that what we are proposing to do is something that would really create something that would, again, I keep saying the next 100 years, it would be in great shape for the next 100 years. So.
Any additional questions?
Thank you.
Would anybody else in the audience like to speak?
As tall as Miles. Good evening. My name is Kim Davidson, and I am the owner at 510 Garnet. I've been a resident of Redondo Beach for 8 years. and both my children have been in Redondo Beach schools since kindergarten. My daughter Penny is in 7th grade at Paris Middle School, and my son Sam is a 5th grader at Barrel Elementary. I tried to convince them to join me, but that was a hard sell. But thankfully, I am joined by neighbors and Redondo residents, many of whom you will hear from. I bought my home at 510 Garnet Street in August of 2022 during a difficult time. I was in the midst of battling breast cancer, and I had recently been divorced. My Garnet home became my sanctuary for peace and happiness. And I love the history of my home, much of which I learned about from the previous owner and some of my neighbors, some of which are also here. It is truly a special place to be able to live in a house with 117 years of history. For example, I learned that during Prohibition, former residents hid moonshine in the rafters and smuggled in gin for poker parties held in the upstairs with police officers who turned a blind eye. It's one of my favorite stories to tell my friends when they're over for drinks. You may also know that Francisca and Camino Real, the intersection that's kind of wonky on the side of the house, that's because it was a busy trolley line that brought LA residents down to Redondo Beach for a day of fun. And I like thinking about that when I walk down that street and around the neighborhood. And there are many stories, almost 12 decades worth, in fact, that could be told about this home. I celebrate all of that history. But the reality of today's version of the house is really of equal importance. There are sagging floors due to the shifting and deteriorated 117-year-old brick, pier, and beam foundation, substandard wiring that won't allow the microwave or oven to run at the same time, or someone to blow dry their hair while either of those things are happening, or have a heater on. There's no AC or heat, of course, and plumbing that you can only imagine how many issues arise. And then, of course, we've had a lot of rain lately, thankfully, but that's presented quite a problem that Miles showed in between the house and the garage area. The house is also very cramped, and though we talked about the square footage, there's a significant amount of square footage that's not usable. Miles showed a couple pictures, but there are 2 sections in the upstairs that you can't walk into or stand in. I use them for storage and somewhat of a closet space because there's not one. The layout is difficult for the lifestyle of today's family. The bathroom downstairs, you have to walk through the living room and the kitchen to get to it, and then onward through there to get to a laundry area. So for the past 2.5 years, I have worked with Miles to figure out a way to design a home that would honor and reflect the current historic structure, but also allow for additional space for my family, my 2 kids, and badly needed updates to support a thriving historic structure for many years to come. I love Redondo Beach and the uniqueness of our homes and neighborhoods. I support my family and community by serving on the PTA boards at both Barrel Elementary and Paris Middle School, volunteering with my children's sports teams, and by supporting the Junior Pipers, which is a philanthropy program that was newly started through Sandpipers here in the South Bay. I hope to gain your approval to renovate and expand 510 Garnet to ensure that this historic home is healthy for our community for 100 more years to come. I took some notes when you guys were asking questions, and so I can speak to some of those, but thank you for your time and your support of our great city. Would you be open to me responding to some of the comments y'all had with my thoughts? Okay. So there are, I know of 2 definite homes on the street that have added 2 stories. The home directly across the street from me, Elaine, who signed my, when we submitted, I walked up and down the street and I have signatures from I think most of, if not all of the addresses that you named, I've certainly talked to all of them, and they've seen this plan. And I have gained their support. But I do know that there are multiple homes that have 2 stories that are historic on Garnet. The one right across the street, and then the one all the way up the street on the corner. So the extension that you mentioned about removing trees, it's shrubbery really that's on that side. There's a lemon tree that I love that's meant to be kept as a part of the renovation, but there are no large trees directly in that side yard. They are lining the outside of the yard and the back of the yard. I think those are the main responses. Do y'all have any questions for me?
I guess I'll go. Thank you for coming to speak.
Of course.
As I mentioned, I love this house. I love the street. My husband and I, is it 9 years ago? 8 years ago? 9 years ago. Looked at one of the houses across the street that was for sale.
Okay.
And we looked at it because I grew up in a home that was built in 1931, which I absolutely adored. I adored everything about it. Everything was original. My parents didn't change a thing, down to the bathrooms and the wiring and everything else. Because, you know, things were made properly a long time ago, and they were made to last. And then there's the historical element, living in a home that, in which somebody that made a difference in Redondo Beach is very special. You know, it's the reason why people move into these homes primarily, because they want to feel that connection to the history. And so when we went to look at this home, we wanted to be part of that history of Redondo Beach. The house was on the Mills Act, it was part of the Mills Act, which was very attractive for us, tax-wise. You know, it was, I think, almost a 50% savings in taxes, so for us it was great. The challenge was that the house, we were a family of 5, and that's really tough, you know. My kids were teens, and teens need room. And there was a garage, which really didn't serve us with all the cars that were going to be around. And sadly, we decided not to buy the house as a result. It was tough because we loved it. I appreciate what you're saying to me about the sagging floors and the wiring and, you know, changing some of the things within the house that are going to make a big impact in the way that you live. And some of these things are safety things, you know, for your family and for moving the house forward for the next 50, 100 years, whatever it is. Changing the layout of the interior is not something that we have purview over.
We do not.
And, you know, so that, great, you know, whatever it is that helps make it a better space for your family, you know, I fully support. The challenge is, you know, all of these other things that I mentioned. You said that you have, you know, that you went and got the support of your neighbors, which is great. It's nice to know that your neighbors are supportive of this. The thing that would concern me is that it also sets a precedent. So if we're going to be approving a renovation of this sort, what's going to happen to the other homes? And now are we going to change the neighborhood? And so I want to just leave it there because I feel that I have made all my points, and want to hear from the rest of my commissioners, fellow commissioners.
Absolutely.
Again, thank you for coming, and I've read all the letters and you seem like the actual wonderful neighbor that everybody should get in Redondo. I'm hoping, I know you probably have incorporated what I'm about to ask you into what your presentation is, but if you can clearly say why you feel it's important to continue having a historic home, so we get some of the motivation behind it, because we're looking at the house as the main thing. When you may be wonderful, but we're not looking at you or your circumstances, we're looking at the house.
Of course. Yeah.
So why is it so important to keep it as a historic home to you?
Yeah, thank you. I tried to speak to some of that, and to your comment about loving the historic home. And when I purchased this home, I talked back and forth with the owner. It was there were very, very few people that wanted this home because of loving the historicness of it and wanting to, I knew when I bought it, I had to make changes to it. It's not livable, and certainly not for a lot longer. That was one of the reasons I bought it, was loving the history of Redondo Beach, loving the street, loving the neighbors' homes, loving walking around that area. We all walk down to the beach and around. But knowing that if someone doesn't buy these homes, that loves the history of the home and is willing to invest in them, and it takes a lot to invest in these homes and keep them viable. There are people that will come, and you mentioned taking it out of Mills, and tear it down and build 4 townhomes on this property, or some developer will come. It's a nice large corner lot. And I don't want that. I don't want that. My neighbors don't want that. We don't want that in Redondo Beach. So, but I think I have 2 children. They have friends over. We live close to the high school. So as they progress through school, we'll go to the high school games and want them to come back. And I want to have a space where I can support my kids and their friends and that lifestyle. And I can still love a historic home and want to have a historic home, but want to have the space and the amenities that exist now, in homes now. So I think it is an attempt to have both of those. And I know Miles, expressed a lot of this, but we have worked I've been in the home, since I moved into the home, we've been working to try to figure out how to make it look and feel as much in line with what it is today. So that is a priority of mine.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, guys.
Would any other members of the public like to speak?
Keep it at this height so I don't have to keep changing it. Thank you for having me, allowing me. My name is Marissa Pugh. I'm a Redondo Beach resident, a friend of Kim's. Our children have grown up together. I've lived in Redondo for 10 years, and I actually grew up in the South Bay, so this is definitely home for me. I'll just keep the comment short, but just expressing my support for the beautiful remodel and redesign, and understanding the value of the importance of a historic home, maintaining, I think, from my perspective, the look and feel, but to make it fit a growing family. You have someone who wants to invest in our city and invest and stay here for her children to come home to when they eventually grow. Because this isn't like 5-year and sell and flip this house. This is an investment for her family. And that resonates with me because I also feel like I don't want to live anywhere else. I don't want my kids to grow up anywhere else. I do have 3 children between the ages of 3 and 8. And this is such a wonderful community that we've already lived in and want to continue to grow in. So I just wanted to express my support for this redesign and build. And I do highly recommend the walk down the street to see and visualize that setback of the second story. I can actually imagine it, having visited Kim's house, walked on her street, walked to dinner to and from her house. That setback, it's not as alarming as it is from the view you see. So I think that's certainly something to be taken into consideration. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Anna Weber, and I'm also a friend of the Davidsons and a resident of Redondo Beach, a business owner in Redondo Beach, and I have 2 boys who go to school here too. So I wrote something down because I can't remember everything I need to say, but I'm here to support the house renovation plans for 510 Garnet presented by Kim Davidson and her family. Kim and I have talked many times about the historical significance of her home and the charm of having a house with character and history. I grew up in a home that was over 100 years old in 3 generations of my family, and I'm really proud of having that home in my family. And so I really appreciate all the things she has told me, the stories of the train that would come or the trolley that would come in front of the house, and the secret meetings in the second story. Makes this house really special, and it's special to her too. However, there are very real needs to have a home be functional, safe, and comfortable for her and her children. These plans are the result of extensive research and collaboration with the architects to continue to honor the history and legacy of homes in Redondo Beach. Kim and her architect understand the importance of maintaining the area's character while addressing the need for safe, functional, and a beautiful home for a family. I believe her plans strike a perfect balance of these 2 elements, and I would like to encourage the committee to approve these plans so that Kim and her family can continue to thrive and grow in Redondo Beach. This is our community, this is her community, and I'd like to stress this is not just a set of house plans, it's an investment that Kim's making in Redondo Beach. She's making it in her family, and our kids and her kids, we hope that they're gonna stay here, but we need to provide them a safe, comfortable, welcoming place to live. And right now, this house needs some major work on it. And so we would like you guys to consider those needs as well. Thank you.
Would any other members in the audience like to speak on this matter?
Good evening. I'm going to try not to reiterate things that everybody else has said, but I just wanted to say just a few things. And one is that I really appreciate that we have residents who are willing to invest and put the time and energy into maintaining these homes. Because I do live in a neighborhood where a lot of homes are being ripped down and rebuilt, and they're all, I mean, I'm not going to lie, my daughter loves them. They're the big white homes pushed to the edges. And honestly, when my family started looking at South Bay, I didn't like how close everything was. What's unique about this property is that because it is on the corner, and even though she is expanding, you still maintain a lot of that space, right? So you don't feel like it's encroaching upon all the neighbors. And I'm not an architect, but I will say when she sent me these plans, honestly, as just a community member, it didn't look that different to me from the front. So I'm obviously not looking at it with as careful an eye as all the commissioners are, but you know, as some of the other folks have said, I would walk down the street and see, you know, could you imagine walking down and then kind of trying to remember these images? And I know it's challenging to do in this setting where you're, you know, looking at it with such a careful eye, but I think that for our city to really invest in people who are going to put the time and energy versus ripping everything down is very valuable. And that's it. Thank you.
I apologize for interrupting, but could we get your name again, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Anita Chu.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak on this? Okay.
Anybody online?
Do we have anybody online?
There is one e-comment that is in support of this item.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
There's an e-comment that is in support of this item.
In support?
In support, yes.
Okay. Do you have to read, do you want to read it? Do you have to read it?
In general practice, it's usually a support or against, but we're more than happy to read it for you.
Okay. I think we're okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
I think we'll be okay. All right. If nobody else wants to speak on this matter, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could make a comment and then make a motion on this item.
Okay.
First and foremost, I wanted to say thank you to Ms. Davidson. It's always great to hear, I think, the proponent of the project. Secondly, I've sat on this commission for a long time. I will say that you've had the most supporters I've ever seen in all my years on this. I agree with nearly all of the comments, especially when we talk about extending the life of an existing house and maintaining the look of our community. I was very moved by your story specifically. And I have a request of staff because I'm going to actually make a motion to, I'm going to use the term table this item. And the reason for that is because as I read the resolution, I would probably vote no, and I don't want to vote no. So I'm going to ask to table it. And then I was going to put a lot of work on staff because I think somebody mentioned Stacy earlier, and we're kind of had the benefit of working with Stacy for a number of years. And I know that in speaking with her, there was a lot of back and forth with project proponents and specifically the architects to really fine tune this. And I think that with a little bit of work, I think we can get there because I look at the renderings, I look on the right-hand side and I'm directionally challenged, but the right-hand side where it's covered by the trees, I could see room for expansion. I can see that it can maintain the existing look of the home and the additional square footage is not that big of a problem. One of the issues that I have, I think Commissioner Glassy talked about the windows on the left-hand side of the home and the extension over the garage. That's where I think you're getting into kind of a new home in totality, and then the rooftop deck, and perhaps it's the size of the rooftop deck, and perhaps, and it is noted in the resolution, perhaps pushing it back or shrinking the size. I think we can get there. I hope we can get there. I always, and I think all the members of the Preservation Commission, as long as I've been here, have really tried to recognize the investment that it takes in a home like this to keep it and preserve it. And I've always voted to try to do that. I think in one of the examples that was provided earlier, I kind of thought, I believe I voted no on the units in the backside. But I would prefer to table this and allow staff to go back, work with the architect and work with the proponent and see if we can possibly get there. It may take a little bit of shrinking it as far as the second story and the rooftop deck, but I want to preserve these homes as well. And I don't think that we're that far off. And so that would be my motion, would be to table this.
I would second that because I'm leaning more towards no, because I think it wasn't fully prepared for us the way it could have been prepared, so I would second.
So the only thing that I would say before we make the motion is that could we go back and direct staff specifics of what you have opposition to so it's not ambiguous?
Thank you.
The applicant doesn't have to go with kind of a blank explanation to their architect as well.
Well, and I feel horrible, but Stacy definitely had a passion for this, and I always wondered where and how that passion was developed. But I know that before all of the projects got to us, there was a back and forth between the architect and her. To get through Stacy, I think, took a great deal of effort. But I would say that what stands out to me is on the left side portion of the home, the extension that nearly approaches the entirety of the roof of the garage, to me stands out as really building a different home. And the rooftop deck, and again, I would love a rooftop deck. But I think when I look at the renderings, it just stands out to me. And again, I get to this point where it's almost so modern that I have a hard time seeing what was originally there. And I know that in the resolution, it notes that it differentiates because it looks different, and it does differentiate, but I think it does it in a way that it loses the characteristics of the home in general. And so when we talk about, if you look at the resolution items, section 2, B, C, and I believe D and E, when you start talking about distinctive features and retaining the characteristics of the home, the rooftop deck stands out to me as something that it's so visible that it does have that impact. And so I'm wondering what can be done, and I'm hopeful that something can be done in order for us to get over this hump. And so that's why I was asking for it to be tabled.
Mhm.
And I think a comment that Commissioner Galassi made is that you're setting the precedent, and you may ultimately, by starting with this home, change the whole characteristic in the neighborhood. And I really would like to actually see what and get a feel of what the neighborhood's all about. I think the architect did a tremendous job with it. I do see some elements that probably need to be in it. My comments, I think, have reflected it. To be re-examined with regards to, can we make it more a historic structure with changes rather than changes on a historic structure? So, and I can talk to you offline if you need more specificity, but I think me actually going out there and seeing it will help out.
Well, we need the body to
Yeah, we have to-
agree to what your direction is.
That's my comments on it.
Okay. I'll speak a little bit about this now too. So I wholeheartedly can empathize with having an historic property. I actually have a historic property that I recently redid, and I was unable to preserve it the way that I wanted to preserve it just because lot restrictions, the way that I had to. So I wholeheartedly understand the challenges to make it livable by modern day standards. You know, I also have a young son, so I understand growing families and the needs with living today. With today's kind of living standards. I actually would take the approach that I would disagree that this doesn't preserve the characteristics of the historical charm of what this house was. And I noticed this really early on, and I'm glad that it was brought, with the exception of the deck. I think that's the thing that's throwing it off for me. Now, again, I would love to get there. I don't know if there's any possibility to push it back from the sight line at all. You know, I don't think that, you know, we want to sit here and say that, you know, you're not entitled to a deck. You can't propose that as a part of your plan. That's an awesome thing to have outdoor space in Redondo. But I think that the one character, not specific thing to me off the first look at this was the deck. I think everything else, I particularly don't have, you know, a lot of reservations with expanding. I don't think that that's particularly restricted within the Mills Act. You know, we want to preserve it. We want to maintain the historical charm of it. I do think that, you know, your architect did a great job about that. I do think that everything that you had mentioned, I personally and intimately know about problems with historical 1910, 1920s bungalow houses, electrical, knob and tube in the thing, you know, insulation issues, flooring issues. I've been through all of it personally. So, I do commend you for undertaking such a project, but I will say that I'm inclined, if we had to vote on it, to deny it based on the deck. I think the deck is just, by how I'm looking at this, I think it's just like this modern kind of touch. And like, once again, it's not to say that you're not entitled to the deck. It's not to say that we can't get there. But if I had to make a motion, my specific issue is not so much the square foot addition. I do agree and understand the needs for modern living, having two small children. But for me, it really comes down to the deck. I think that the deck really kind of throws off the historical charm of it. Commissioner Rowe.
So, sounds like the deck's an issue, sounds like the extensive addition above the garage may be an issue. I would tend to approve it because there are three houses now with 2 stories, so it's not an anomaly to have 2 stories, sorry. As a realtor, I've seen neighborhoods that you know, they're all exactly the same, they never can change. This is not one of the circumstances. I would approve it. It's a large lot. I think you can accommodate an expansion due to the large lot. I like the fact that there's setbacks, like she mentioned, off the road, so I would approve it. And that's all I have to say.
So we're not making a motion right now. We're just providing.
Commentary.
We're having some commentary, and then we'll take a crack at making a motion.
So I would
did.
say that Commissioner Caldwell, I would agree with you to table this, send it back for, you know, to have it looked at again. The rooftop deck is one thing, but the one thing that, you know, I keep going back to are these windows. There are actually 5 windows that are being removed. One is from the side of the garage, that's one, it's being removed. 3 on that second story on the left-hand side of the house. And then on the other side of the house, we're removing 2 additional on the second story, and I can't tell because there's not really a good side picture of what's happening to that, where that gable is over there, what's happening to the windows there. So I would agree with you, Commissioner Caldwell, table and come back. And I would also like to understand if, you know, if the applicant intends on keeping the house under the Mills Act or considering removing the house from, you know, its designation, if it's possible, now that it's under the Mills Act, I don't know. That's something that we have to ask because it could come up again. We should know that answer.
Mhm.
Commissioner McCauley.
As a novice here as well, we'll have to learn on this one. You know, I'm leaning towards approving. I am curious with the deck as well. I think that, so tabling and plus the windows, I think are a serious issue. I know with the mills, that's kind of a very specific issue that we need to find out anyway. But yeah, I do think the design definitely does a really good job, better than a lot of other ones, of keeping the intent of the time period. I think that's, to stick with that. The size, initially, you know, you look at the numbers and you're like, wow, you're doubling the size of the house, but the lot can certainly handle the size. And from the street, it doesn't, you know, it absorbs it well. And so, you know, I think we want to honor the landmark designation. And you, as a homeowner, though, we want to keep the investment into our town. And so utilizing the appropriateness is a good step. I'm too new to see, you know, is this off the scale or not compared to prior properties. So I think tabling it might be best for, hopefully it doesn't take too long because I imagine I would want to build it and get it going. I understand that. But we have to do our due diligence as well, so that's where I'm at.
Can I ask one more question? I'm looking at one of the plans that has an ADU on there, an existing ADU, which is going to be, where is that up in relation to everything on the property?
Do we have to open the hearing if we're having this?
I'm just asking staff, so I'm not.
Do we have to open the hearing if we're speaking on it? Because
No, I think during discussion, you're able to ask staff questions, but to be on the safe side, let's,
But if you're going to table it,
Reopen.
that's the question that I would like to know, where it is on the property. So that
Okay.
makes it part of.
okay. So do you want to take a crack at the motion you would like to make, Commissioner? And then we can see if we can work through it.
I would simply make a motion to table this item, to instruct staff to work with the architect and the project proponent to do what they can to make, I don't want to call them corrections, but changes and bring us back what you can work with and allow the commission. It sounds like there's some support already. I would tell you that I personally am close, but I think that the rooftop deck and perhaps the portion, as I mentioned earlier, so I don't want to put you in the spot of having to promise us anything that you can bring back, but work with the architect and the proponent and bring us back whatever edits or changes you could and allow us to reconsider or to consider, because we won't be considering today. So my motion is to simply table the item.
the term would be continue to a date uncertain. We could pick a specific date.
Can I make the caveat that we bring it to the next meeting? Because I know how difficult it is to be in limbo to build a house. So can we kind of expedite this if it's simply to make revisions?
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Could we reiterate the objective features? It was, my question is the size of the above garage extension a problem?
I don't think that was was that a part of the motion?
No, it's not. I think it's just the aesthetic.
Yeah.
When you,
Yeah.
of course, I'm looking at the rendering, but when you look at it from the street level, all you see is, to me, a new home. And I don't want to keep harping on it, but the deck, perhaps it wouldn't be as visible once constructed, but from the renderings, it really does appear to me to be a new structure, a new home. And I understand the value of these historic homes. So I'm not asking for anything specific because I know that this might be a give and take, but it seemed like the architect was willing to work on some of these items. And it seemed like there's a lot of passion behind the project proponent. So I think we can get there, and I would say work with them and bring back what you can.
But to be fair, just really quick, Commissioner, I think we need to be specific because I don't think we want to get into a situation where we say, bring us something that we might like better, right? We want to specify the exceptions that we have with.
I've continued to make the same two issues
So
throughout.
perfect. So if that's the motion, so, okay. So do you want to just repeat it one more time so we know what we're instructing staff to come back with?
What I stated is that as drafted, the resolution, at this time, I would vote no, given those two specific items. So I'm simply making the motion to table it. I believe that the proponents and the architect have heard my concerns. I believe staff has heard my concerns. And I'm hopeful that they could come back within a month. But sometimes I know that there's a lot of other projects and life and kids that can get in the way of this. So I'm asking staff to bring it back when you can. But that's my motion that I would prefer is just to simply table it and allow them to bring it back when they're ready.
Somebody like to second it?
I believe I already have a second.
Commissioner Morocco second it. All right. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All All right, moving on to item K, items continued from previous agendas. Do we have any items?
No.
Okay. All right, moving on to item L, items for discussion prior to action. L1, discussion and possible action regarding the creation of an ad hoc subcommittee to assist staff in the planning and implementation of the city's 133rd birthday celebration at the Historical Museum on April 26, 2025.
Okay, so good evening, Commission. It's nice to see you all. I have here tonight Jack Meyer. He is our new Cultural Arts Manager. I don't know if you've heard, but Gary Margolis is no longer with the city. And so Jack, who has extensive experience in the city and has been around for a very long time, we ping him for a lot of different things. So we're happy to have him on board. So just wanted to introduce you. You may start seeing him come to the upcoming meetings. So, so with that, I just have a really brief report. The Historical Museum annually celebrates the city's birthday celebration in April. It's currently scheduled for 2025 on April 26th. That's a Saturday. And in order to have the activities and everything coordinated for this, given the turnover in staff on the cultural arts side of our department, wanted to recommend for the commission to create an ad hoc subcommittee to assist staff directly with the planning and implementation of that event. Secondly to that, if you all agree to that, what we want to do just to help expedite the process for the planning and implementation, if the commission can develop a not to exceed amount of money to spend on that event so that the ad hoc subcommittee and staff know what that full allocation is so that we can start making the plans and implementation of that as soon as possible. So, so that's ultimately it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So I'll turn it over to you.
Can you give us a background as to, has there been an ad hoc committee for the planning
for this
before?
That's a good question. I know that there's been, when there was a historical commission, and Commissioner Morocco may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe that there was a museum events subcommittee, and so they would indirectly plan for that type of event, but I think that might have been a standing subcommittee that would plan events all year long. So this is really just a kind of a stopgap approach, and if you will, given the turnover with staffing, as well as a lot of other very critical items and projects that we're trying to push through department-wide. We thought this would be a great opportunity to develop a kind of a short-term ad hoc subcommittee to help us with this. So to answer your question, I don't know that we've ever had an ad hoc one, but there has indirectly been one for events at the museum.
And regarding the not to exceed amount, what was a typical budget in the past for this type of event?
So in the past few years, there has been more activities and interactions planned for that. So there has been, I believe last year there was a stilt walker, jugglers, and one more. I'm trying to pull up the report. I'm sorry? A dancing, a cultural dancing. Thank you. So I believe in total that was about $3,000 for all three of those performers. I should also mention that typically what happens is the Morel House, which is overseen by the Redondo Historical Society, they will typically do kind of a supplementary activity. So they usually provide birthday cake, for example. And so we have not on our side usually done anything with food or beverages because Morel House handles that. So ours has been more focused on activities or entertainment.
And is this part of your budget already?
Well, the museum itself has a budget of about $20,000 for the year, at least for this current fiscal year, that you can use however you'd like to in the museum. So we don't really have a budget specific for this event. So it's really kind of up to the commission on how we should spend that $20,000 and how much of that we should spend on this event specifically.
Anybody have any questions? I had another question.
An ad hoc subcommittee, that's where we add members from outside of the commission, obviously.
No, an ad hoc subcommittee is just a short-term subcommittee.
It's just for
by time,
specific.
okay.
And it's very specific,
So it
yeah.
would just be temporarily until this event is over.
Correct, yes.
And so needing, for the subcommittee, we need one member at least from this commission,
At least one, but no more than 3.
no more than 3. But community members can join that subcommittee?
They can't officially join, but you could certainly consult with them and get their input, but they would not be official members of the subcommittee.
So we need 1 or 2 or 3 of us to kind of take the lead. and
Yeah,
to
it
help organize.
basically functions similar to regular subcommittee. It just is the short term and very super focused.
And the purview of this ad hoc committee is simply to have a not to exceed amount. It's not necessarily to solicit particular, like, things that they want. It looks like this is just not to exceed amount to implement for the
And
event.
to assist in implementation and planning and coordination. So if there was, let's say the performers
implementation of the
wanted
event,
to
okay.
come, we would ask the ad hoc subcommittee to help coordinate that. And then we, of course, would issue payment, but they would be the ones kind of booking the performers and making sure, and doing anything else that staff needs some assistance with.
Would it make sense to, if anybody was interested in doing this, would it make sense to approve the creation of the ad hoc subcommittee and then for that subcommittee to have the discussions and then come back next month with, wait, what's next month? That's March. With a not to exceed amount, because it's hard to like understand, you know,
Yeah.
how much. I don't know if anybody else agrees with that, but.
So I have a background public budgeting, preparing, ACFers, so I'm pretty good with understanding like, what funds we're able to kind of use for this. I don't think I have a problem with, helping in that element. I think the only thing that I might have a conflict with is the date of it, because obviously like, we would be present for the actual event, I would assume, right? If we're coordinating with vendors or anything like that.
You wouldn't necessarily need to. I mean, it would obviously be ideal for the entire commission to be there, but it would not be required. We would have staff there, and we would of course be coordinating alongside the subcommittee. So it would not be the sole responsibility of you all to plan and coordinate with the vendors. We would have that kind of secondary contact with them.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Just based on this, I think this is something that we can help, city staff with if we do that. We have a small budget, kind of propose a couple entertainment things. We already talked about food and beverage, seemed like it's been covered, separately already. I'm okay making the motion to establish the ad hoc committee, the ad hoc subcommittee. Yes.
I'd love to share some thoughts on it. First of all, Jack is a wonderful person to do it. He's been doing the birthday parties for a while. The problem has always been with this function, because I do the Morale House and I used to be the person at the Historical Museum. The publicity, who's doing the publicity? Because that seems to always have the falling down on it. Is it somebody on staff that's going to be the one that's doing it, coordinating it, getting it out there? Because
It would be a joint effort. So we could certainly push it through all of our channels. We have our social media pages. We can put the flyer on the city website. We can do those types of things, but we'd also rely on the subcommittee to share the flyer within their own networks. But that would be a dual partnership on that.
And staffing, is Michelle going to be able to work on it?
I don't know who specifically, but we would make sure that we have
Because
enough
what-
staff to work on it.
What I really hope that doesn't happen is that ultimately the sub ad hoc people are the ones who are actually staffing and manning and supervising what's going on. And
I think to Kelly's point is that I don't think the expectation is that, and I think we've discussed that, right? We're just simply helping with the couple things that they're asking.
Okay, I've actually experienced it, so I know what the pitfalls are at this point with the city doing this stuff, and I'm trying to at least clear the way so that if you volunteer to be on this ad hoc committee, that you at least have certain assurances that you won't be wasting your time because they are not doing their part on the city staff side. So that's the concern I have. The food, we're a blue zone, and that's why the cake's coming from the Morel House. I'll be there anyway because I volunteered to do it there. But I really, the staff needs to step up and at least identify the people who are there. You have a new staff person over there. You have a limited number. Sydney is probably a good person to bring in as well, since she was a docent over there. But you need to get that staffing and you need to get the publicity going to do that. You also had raised the question about the trivia night. And I didn't know if you wanted to bring that up as part of this process as well.
I think we were hoping to coincide it with the birthday party. However, library facilities are not available during that time, so we will still have the trivia event, but it'll be pushed out a little bit further. So we'll hope to promote it at this event. Thank you.
Okay. Do you guys want to be on? Go ahead.
I'd like to second the motion and clearly state that I think the city of Redondo Beach has the greatest staff. So thank you all for everything that you're doing, and I want to second the motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
And then also, I think just additionally, or maybe we add this as a part of the motion, who we want as a part of the ad hoc committee, or subcommittee, excuse me. I'm okay to go on it for the budgeting aspect of it. And I can call whoever and coordinate whatever. Would anybody else like to
Yeah,
participate?
I'll join you in that, it's fine.
Anybody else? All right, then I'll also make the motion that the members of the ad hoc subcommittee include Commissioner Rowe and myself. Would somebody like to second the motion?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right,
You should know that the police and fire probably will be contacted as well because they participate.
okay. Moving on to item L2, discussion and possible action regarding the development of a Franklin Park subcommittee.
Chair, if I may, was the commission wanting to develop a not to exceed amount, or is the intent to return next month
We
On that.
we can help propose the not to exceed amount.
and then return next month for the commission to approve? Okay, sounds good, thank you.
I will look at your budget, don't worry.
No problem. Okay, so for Franklin Park, in the current fiscal year budget, the city council appropriated $500,000 to replace the existing playground at Franklin Park with an all abilities playground. And so to kind of jumpstart that project and prepare so that we're ready to go, we want to do is develop a stakeholder group. And on that stakeholder group would have 2 members from this commission, since part of your purview is Parks and Recreation. So what we're asking is to develop a subcommittee for Franklin Park Playground redesign. And so again, we're just asking you to create a subcommittee of up to 3 members. And that concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions you have. It's in the very early stages, so I don't have any specifics, but I'm sure we'll get more to that in the next few months.
What's the budget on that?
It's $500,000 has been allocated for that project. I don't know what the total cost will end up being. It'll depend on a lot of the design elements. If you remember when we did Dominguez Park, there was a lot of moving parts with the cost.
What was the budget on that one? Was that
Oh
over $1
my.
million?
I think we ended up, for some reason, I'm thinking it was somewhere around just under 300,000 just on the
really?
playground elements.
Okay.
But I think that was a little, I think we asked for a little additional for
Yeah,
some
we
of
did.
the pieces. So, yeah, but that was part of a much bigger project.
Yeah,
So
the
the
whole
higher
pro-
cost
the
is
whole-
probably what you're thinking for
that's
the
right.
larger. Mhm.
All right. Well, I would do that committee.
Me too.
I was going to say, we do the facility users committee, the subcommittee for the facility users anyway, right? So we might want to have one of the meetings at, Franklin Park, see if we can,
Right. Include them.
yeah.
Yeah, you can count me on that one.
If you can put in a pickleball court over there, it's ideal for it.
That's for another agenda.
Yes.
For another
Well, there
agenda.
is actually 3 pickleball courts over there currently, so.
I'm happy to help with that committee as well.
All right,
Me as well.
okay. Somebody would like to make the motion?
I make a motion that we create a subcommittee for the Franklin Park play structure design.
Yes.
And myself,
Commissioner Galassi.
Commissioner Galassi, and Commissioner Caldwell.
Caldwell.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Do you want public comment on any of these?
Do we need
Any
public?
public
Oh,
comment?
There are no e-comments or attendees for this.
okay. All right, moving on to item L3, Commission Subcommittee Review and Project Update. Do we have any updates? I know we didn't have a January meeting, so it's been quite a while.
No, the only thing we had was that question that I asked at the beginning of the meeting regarding the item that was to be brought back to the minor alteration subcommittee. That was the only thing.
Okay.
But we discussed that.
Yeah, I actually have a written report that's in the blue folder that you put in there. And since we have nothing actually agendized, there's recommendations from the subcommittee, I guess it's a committee, I don't know if we have subcommittee. There's a recommendation and the action item, and the action item is to, we'll start with Wilderness Park. I ended up meeting with the Public Works Director, and he plans on coming to our meetings at some point to talk about landmark designation for Wilderness Park. So I would ask that the commission agendize, and I think it was already for this meeting, but it didn't make it onto the agenda, discussion of, as it says in the blue folder, to approve Wilderness Park as a historic landmark designation and forward the request to council for their approval and work with staff to complete the state designation form and request council approval for submitting it to the state. So that's the first part. So
I just want to add that we will work with staff to bring that back. We can't have a guaranteed date because we want to make sure we have the stakeholders here, but we're more than happy to bring that back at a future agenda time, for sure.
So it may make sense just to have a motion as I go through each of these items, or we can do it at the end, but I just would like it to be agendized.
I don't know if we can make motions. Could we make motions from, because we have to agendize it now?
But that's what they're asking, is to agendize it.
Oh, you're asking to?
That's all the action items are to agendize
Well,
the topic at the next meeting.
Well, we can mention that during items for staff to bring this to the agenda for the next one, rather than the updates of progress for the subcommittees.
Okay.
And did we already vote to motion it to be?
That was a recommendation on another referral, and I think we've made some progress, but we're still working with staff and stakeholders to bring that back fully at a future commission
So we don't
agenda
need to make
item.
another.
I don't believe so. It's on our radar. We're making progress towards it, but
Okay.
we do intend to bring it back as an agenda item. We just can't guarantee it'll be next meeting.
I want to have this conversation. I just want to keep that for item M when we're talking about
Okay.
referrals to staff.
Either way works fine, but I tried to set it up, the committee's recommendation, and then the request for the action, which is, and each one, though, there's an action item, it's to agendize it for the group discussion. And I tried to present as much information to this. We tried to present enough information to the commission to actually have enough information to agendize it. So the next one, and I'm glad our deputy director's here, the Dominguez walking timeline, park walking timeline. This came out of the Historical Commission, and it came out of the, it got presented to the Parks and Recs Commission, and we just wanted to be agendized again for a discussion of the project. You have the reports from both commissions in the packet. Path of history markers. the Director of Community Services asked that we present something. And again, it's the same thing. We want to agendize the prioritization of the next 8 signs, as I said in the report. The next eight have been budgeted and funded. And so want to get the prioritization coming out of the commission. The city's paying for these 8 signs. The normal process was to actually let the person who is sponsoring it pick it. But so now we'll be looking at that, and then a protocol for the markers. And we've hooked in Commissioner Lang, who seems to have a knack for making edits and reviewing and synthesizing. So it's going to be something where she can participate in it once we get the design out. And then the Director for Community Services has come up with a different proposal. So when we actually discuss it at the meeting, we'll be talking about the different alternatives on how to get the designs done. So that's another one to agendize. We talked about museum metrics. That's a work in progress. We're going to be hearing from the library director about some suggestions on it, but Mr. Margolis said that he would like some support on how to get more people in the museum, and we have no basis for starting point. So we'll wait to hear from Mr. Vinke with regards to how he wants to proceed with it before we present it. The birthday celebration, we brought it up. You guys have taken care of it. The recommendation was to support and promote the event. We had actually an action item to agendize it, and you guys took care of it so that we don't have to worry about that one. And then we have some possible future activities you can look through. We're still trying to determine the interest and support and who would be involved in the process. So that's something we'll be looking for. So there's no commission action at this time.
Would you like to also touch base on the bylaws subcommittee and our meeting?
Oh, yeah. Do you want to do that or do you want me to do it?
If you're on a roll, I can also speak about it if you would like.
So if you recall the first meeting that we had, we were presented a whole bunch of bylaws. And I guess 2 weeks ago, we met with Director Vinke, our chair, and myself, and to go over what was proposed as a bylaw. Have you distributed it to the members of this panel to get feedback from them?
No, So I think where we left off too, and so we did meet, we had, Dana was very nice to kind of take the lead with getting us a draft. And there was a couple things that Commissioner Morocco and myself had pointed out. Some of the standardized language we realized might change. The city clerk's office might change some of the standardized bylaws stuff. So we're really focusing on specific purviews for the commission. I admittedly need to get my edits to Dana. I committed to doing it. It's just got stuck doing a couple other things, but I wanted to take a crack at, having that drafted out just in case if there was any standardized language that might get removed or edited. We don't want to spend too much time redlining that with them to come back and just say that that's a moot point as it pertains to the bylaws anyway. So what we took away from our meeting was to kind of focus specifically on purviews. So once we, finalize that, we'll remit that back to Dana for clarification before we bring it to the commission. Anything else about? So that's our update for the bylaws.
Good summary. Thank you.
I would point out, though, if you do want to see what our proposed bylaws look at, I believe cultural arts had a similar identical language. So you can't share it with comments with us, but you can definitely share it with Director Vinke.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. If there's no more subcommittee updates, let's move on to item M, items
Let
from.
me interject just volunteer recognition subcommittee. Obviously, we had a break in meetings, but we've got 2 nominees, as we did last time. They're in the queue. We're processing those for approval. So for those of you who don't know, we give away a certificate of recognition framed in this engraved surfboard, really cool. So that's our award is the surfboard. So I'm working with Kelly on that, so appreciate you guys. That's it.
For the facility users, I just want to remind everybody that we're about to start baseball and softball. Redondo Beach Little League and Redondo Sunset at Alta Vista Park, so those parks will be continuing to be pretty busy. There's a lot going on, and I think for the most part, they've had their drafts and a lot of their activities are beginning. So as issues come up, we may bring it to the committee or not, but a lot going on there.
All right, excellent. Moving on to items for staff, item M.
Before we get there, can I make a motion to receive and file all the reports that have been presented?
I don't,
I don't think we have in the past. I think it was just more of a comment.
yeah, we just have like a verbal update of it. I don't think.
I believe in the beginning, we received and filed the blue folder items, and those
Yeah,
commission
this
reports were
was
filed in
included
blue
in the blue
folders, so
folder.
they have been received and noted and uploaded.
Okay. Commissioner Caldwell, would you like to start with any items from staff?
I have no items.
Commissioner Morocco?
You want to come back to me at the end, or I can go now?
Absolutely can go.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion to agendize the landmark designation of Wilderness Park, which I believe we already did, so it may not even be necessary, but so I'll skip on that one. To agendize a discussion of the Dominguez Park walking timeline, I'd like to make a motion to agendize that for discussion.
I'll second that.
Excuse me, but I'm a little confused. Item M is items
Yeah.
from staff
Oh, from staff.
rather than item N, which is.
I apologize for
Yeah, it
that
should be for,
confusion.
it should be,
Commission agenda topics.
it should be for staff.
For
It says-
staff.
well, it says
Is it
member
for
items
staff?
or
Because then
referrals
the
to
next
staff.
one is future commission agenda topics. If we're
Yeah.
asking to agendize something, wouldn't it be item?
Yeah,
M?
I apologize for that. For M, we have no more items from staff. So
Okay.
if we want to move directly to N, then that would be the appropriate
Okay.
area to bring
Thank
these
you.
items. So I apologize for that confusion.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Moving on to item N, let's try this again. Commission member items and future commission agenda topics. Commissioner Caldwell,
Still have none.
got it.
I have several. One of them is to agendize for discussion the Dominguez Park walking timeline that's referenced in the committee report. And I thought I heard a second before.
A second on that, yes.
Do we vote for commission member items?
Individually.
I didn't think. it
We're
vote-
just
isn't it?
we're just
Yeah.
directing, right? Like, we're not voting on any. Yeah.
We're not voting on the actual proposal, we're voting to have a discussion on it,
We have to approve it to be on the agenda.
right?
But we can, okay.
Do you want to do them individually, or are we doing them like all lumped together?
Do you want to?
I just do it individually because it's going to take, not as long, so we'll start with the walking timeline. Why, I guess we can do it
I
collectively.
mean, like, do you want to put all yours together, and then, if he has something, and then if I have something, they're separate? To agendize, do you want to vote to agendize all of the items that?
I have two things to vote to agendize at this point because we already agendized Wilderness Park.
Okay,
So one is the Dominguez Park walking timeline, which, as we put out in the reports, already been before both historical and Parks and Recs. So I think I still heard a second.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then the other item is the path of history markers, to agendize them consistent with the action item in the committee report with regards to the production and the protocol and the like, which is all set out in the action item. So that's my motion to agendize that as well.
Motion to agendize.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye. Okay, so now I go to the other stuff that came out of the minutes. So we talked about the metrics. I want to thank the library and the library director. We had our city charter day. There was a whole exhibit that was allowed to be expressed at the library lobby, and I think there was a number of people who actually saw it and commented, so I want to thank you for that. We talked about at the last meeting about the $1,000 that was budgeted at one time for a historic researcher for a Pride Day activity. Don't know what the status is on that.
Yeah, we've had some discussion on that, and we hope to be able to have an answer for you.
Okay, we actually have somebody that is a city employee who said he has contacts that can actually get the person. So I will bring that up with Director Orta and see what she can do with that. The Park Ranger program, I don't know if you are coming back with that at some point.
Yeah, we're discussing with staff again. You know, I greatly appreciate the commission's patience as we try to navigate a lot of items and bring them back to you in a quality fashion and in a manner that's respectful of the whole program so we can make some progress on it. So it's something that I think we've been in communication with staff on and hope to bring back in the near future.
Okay. And then the status of the Villa Reno plaque, I believe that's with you, Ms. Orta. So I know that Commissioner Lang, if she was here, would be able to give a report, but if you can at some point in the next meeting, give us a status on that. I'm not going to talk about the pickleball consultant because that's your thing. And since Commissioner Lang isn't here, but she did ask at the last meeting about an update on the Dominguez Park playground. And I guess that would be your category.
Yeah, so for Dominguez Park, I will have to circle back with our Public Works team. I know that there has been some work down there, but I haven't been by in a few weeks, so I don't know exactly where they are with that project. So, but I will certainly follow up and see if we can get a more concrete update for you in the next month.
Great. And the last thing is the museum. For those of you who have not been to the museum yet, it's worth going to. Wednesday afternoons, I believe, and then Saturday and Sunday from 12 to 3. So I encourage you to check out the museum, especially those that are going to be doing the birthday celebration. You might want to see what you're looking at, and hopefully Jack's sound system will be there. That's it for me.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner Rowe?
Oh, nothing for me.
A couple of questions here. Do we have an update on Alta Vista pickleball? Whatever that was, the report that needs to happen.
Yes, so the sound study. So we are very close to finalizing the agreement. We had to refine the scope for the sound study to make sure that it was as comprehensive as we needed it to because of the topography of that location. We wanted to make sure that there was multiple areas that were going to be tested, considering there's the sidewalk looking down into the park, and then there's also the balconies of some of the nearby homes, which is a higher elevation, but more of a direct shot from. So all of that to say, we've really tried to refine it to make sure that we do this right the first time. So we're very close to finalizing that scope and drafting that agreement. So we're hoping in the next, I don't want to give a timeline, but I know that it's something that the team has been really working to finalize soon. So we should have a pretty good update on that very soon.
A couple of weeks?
Possibly. We've had quite, I would say in the last 3 to 4 months, our departments in particular, I mean, every department is super busy, but we've had a number of really critical large projects that we were closing out. So I'm hoping pretty quickly we'll have a little bit more time to dedicate to such projects such as Alta Vista.
Because we have, I've been getting a lot of questions on it because it's, 7 months since the council approved it. So
yeah.
Along that same vein, I am curious, have we looked into a different reservation system for Alta Vista?
Not to my knowledge. We just use our recreation software currently.
The Rec Track? I am just curious how that's working out and if we're getting the data that's needed, and if we can agendize a discussion on that.
On our end, the functionality of it is fine. We haven't, I mean, I would have to talk directly with the staff, but I'm not aware of any user issues with booking and managing their accounts and profiles and everything. So I don't know that there's any need for anyone to look at alternate programs, but, so I don't know if there's a different experience that you're familiar with.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is because I did have a copy of the rec track from the time that it started until like 8 months later. I think it began like in March, and then I had from March until December. And it's not so much the user experience, but the data that's coming out of it, and how it's very, very complicated to read and very complicated to be able to understand and be able to use that information to make good decisions, assuming Alta Vista moves forward, Alta Vista pickleball courts move forward. We want to have, you know, the very best data and make good decisions that are least impactful for tennis, and lessons taught by our city folks. So that's, you know, you and I can send you what I have, so you can see what I'm talking about, because it was really impossible to understand.
Yeah, I do have some experience. The reporting, I do agree with you, the reporting from that program is limited. It's not as customizable as we would like it to be. We are currently in discussions and have sat through a few training sessions with RecTrack directly, so they can walk us through some of the customization options that are available to us, but then also inform us of the options that they can do on our behalf. So there's some things that we just aren't incapable to do on our side as the main user, that if we connected with them, they have the ability to customize certain reports for us. So to answer your question with the reporting, it's something we are aware of and we're trying to work through. But to that end, we're not in a position currently or are looking at different programs to specific for that location. It's used department-wide for class registrations, tennis, sailing. I mean, it's everything. So to move into a different program for just Alta Vista, we would have to do it across our entire department, which would be a heavy lift. If the need is there, we're certainly open to it, but we aren't currently in discussions for that.
It's a problem that was happening in Torrance as well. And the pickleball ambassador there actually had, he's an IT person, so he had to help the city and give his time to work with RecTrack, you know, for the reservation system for pickleball as well. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm bringing it up. I'm just, you know, hoping that, you know, we can do right by the city and make sure that, you know, we're getting the revenue that we need to get and getting the data that we need to get to make good decisions. That's all.
I wanted to ask a follow-up on the speed cushions at Alta Vista Park, or any progress on
Yes.
bulb or any speed remedies are in the pipeline?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that I don't misspeak. I did connect with Public Works, and they are working on getting that done, that project starting soon.
Okay.
There are some additional staff resources that will become available in that department within the next month or two that will be dedicated to that. So you should see some progress on that within the next, I would say, the next 6 to 9 months. I don't know when actual work will begin, but they're certainly going to be working behind the scenes to get that project moving forward.
Is there any temporary items they could do for the immediate season starting now?
That would be a question for Public Works. I wouldn't know, but I can.
But the approval is for speed cushions, or is it for the bulb? Do you remember?
It's for, let's see, it was the speed tables. I don't know the difference between a speed cushion or a speed table. I think it's a difference between how high it
So it goes
rises.
flat instead of like a bump
I
over?
believe so.
Kind of goes up and flat and then down? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And I also have no additional items for the commission at this time. All right. All right, moving on. Item O, adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.